Who are the real Jews? Analysis. I don't have to know everything to do an analysis. And I'm very good, actually, at picking out key points that even the people who look at all the facts and are good at that, have good memories and are just quick without daydreaming while they're studying and reading. I have a problem daydreaming if I'm reading. They always miss something when they get so many details together and then they miss the main point. It seems like, and I'm good at bringing out the main point. Hey, this is the main point right here. This common denominator, the simple root point. But you know, there's a lot of groups out there claiming to be the real Jews, and they're not the real Jews. I know the Bible well, and I'll say this kind of as a joke, but I've studied the Bible more than Moses. Most of us today have, because the Bible wasn't written yet at the time of Moses. He wrote the first few books. So anyway, there's a way to know some basic stuff. You look at the Bible history, okay? The Bible wasn't written by Neanderthals or apes. It was written by people. So we had people back then, all right? Now, some people, they like to point out it was written by people to deny that God wrote the Bible, right? It was inspired by God. All the stories match that show God having the same character throughout the whole Bible. The God who birthed Jesus, right? So, and Jesus validated the Bible. He pointed back to Moses and different things. So, but we're not talking about that subject. We're talking about what is the evidence of who the real Jews are. Okay, you have the flood of Noah, and all you had was Noah's family after the flood. Then you had Shem, Ham, and Japheth, his three sons and their families. And they were all near Turkey, in Iraq, near Baghdad, I think. Babel, wherever Babel is, it's not too far from Turkey. The ark crashed right over the border of Turkey, and then they mostly went down just a little south into Iraq, right? And they tried to build a tower to heaven. God changed the language at that time. He said, you can only get to heaven through me, not through your own power. So they all had one language. So from there, near Turkey, that's where everybody spread around the world after God changed the language. So Ham's families went down south towards Africa, and I won't say below the Sahara Desert, but mostly they went below the Sahara Desert. All right. But some of them, I guess, could have stopped off and landed in Egypt. I don't know how that went. Some of them could have veered off to Saudi Arabia before they got to the Red Sea. Who knows exactly? But it's clear from the Bible that Ham went south, and I forget if Shem or Japheth who went east. I get those mixed up a lot for some reason. I think Ham, Shem, and Japheth. I forget that. I haven't reviewed it as much because that's not the big argument, But so the big argument is between basically black and white. It's not between Asians and I guess part of the reason the argument is between black and white. People think it's because of America, and part it could be, but if you think about it, it's because of black people coming from Africa, which is below Egypt, below the Sahara Desert, generally, which is obvious actually that they came from below the Sahara Desert near the equator, right? That's where the darker skin came from. So there is one debate that whether that darker skin was, whether some Adam and Eve were darker skinned or lighter skinned. Okay, so but that's a different argument or different observation than what we're talking about here. However, I will say it doesn't seem that people would turn lighter skinned over time if they were started out being darker skinned. Whereas it'd be easier for people who are lighter skinned to live near the equator and the sun, and over the years build a gene to protect their skin from the sun and turn darker. So it's not like you have to stop protecting. You got your DNA, if it ends up building more melanin, or is it melanin, which is probably produced, I'm not saying for sure, probably produced by vitamin D. So you see, I'm coming at it from a very, very practical standpoint, regardless of what haters would say. So somebody would say, okay, if I say it's not true that blacks were the real Jews, and there's black groups. There's one called the Hebrew Israelites that is out there now claiming blacks are the real Jews, and they go so far as to say no white man will ever go to heaven. I've run into these people in the streets talking to people, and just run into them and had a conversation, bus stops and different things, and but I've seen some preaching. I didn't get on the subject particularly of who's going to heaven, who's going to hell, because I've already heard them preach that somewhere at a function once. They were yelling that only black men can go to heaven, no white man will ever go to heaven. All right, so that's actually racist. And they would say, though, if I say that actually blacks aren't the real Jews, they would call that racist. But it's not racist if it's true. It's racist if they're claiming that blacks are the real Jews, and they're saying it because they're lying, right? Because there's no evidence that Israel used to be all black, for instance. And we do know that the Jews lived in Israel. So what we do know, here's a good part of the analysis, a good chunk of it. We do know that in the migration from after the flood, that the Jews had been in Egypt and Israel. They were from Israel, and they were held in slavery to Egypt for a while. And so then when Moses left, I can probably trace this most. There's probably other stories I could trace, but this one's the one I know the best. Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt. Now, Egypt was Africa. And so there is a legitimacy to, I'll say, I guess I should summarize this point before I continue. There's not as much evidence to show that the real Jews were black, and you can't just make them black because you want to call it racist if we don't agree with you that they're black. And because the reason I'm not agreeing with somebody that they're black is because to me the color matters to the people that do that. The color doesn't matter to me, but delegitimizing who the real Jews are matters. And Hitler didn't think the Jews were black; he was killing all white Jews, right? So that's just back before we started teaching lies about history and stuff as much, before Democrats started doing that, basically. And then false religions like Islam. And I will say that some of the black Hebrew Israelites that I've talked to were promoting ISIS, the ISIS terrorist group as well. And I've had conversations with different ones, not the friendliest of conversations, but they did have a conversation and didn't harm me specifically. But one of them was telling me how white man doesn't exist. And actually, when you go into space, he told me that the aliens, when the astronauts went to space, they saw the other was black people up there, and they're the ones that created us all. And all there ever used to be was black people and no white people. And I didn't challenge him as to, okay, well, how did the black creators mess up and make white people? I didn't ask him that. So but I didn't, he wouldn't let me get much of a word in. But that particular person is the one that started promoting ISIS terrorists in front of me. So they're not, I've always thought the stuff they teach sounds kind of like Islam. And I've run into different stuff out there. You got a lot of people now, there's a new thing that they're doing, and it's from the black, some part of the black community, probably Islam link, black Islam. And I don't completely like saying black Islam because people teach that black Islam is a black religion and Christianity is a white religion, and that's them being racist because this Christianity, the Bible doesn't teach that there's Christianity is a white religion or a black religion. It's just human. It teaches that we're all one human race, right? And that God and Jesus rose from the dead. We're all going to die, and Jesus rose from the dead. He's the one who has the power to save us, and he forgave us on the cross. We got to trust him as Lord. We have to choose. We got to sign up for Jesus' heaven to go to heaven, right? You don't sign up for Muhammad's heaven, Buddha's heaven, or somebody else's heaven to get into Jesus' heaven. You have to sign up for Jesus' heaven. That's pretty simple. And so, and you trust it by signing up. You're trusting it fully. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. So you're not just trusting that he's one option. You can't do that. Or otherwise you're not trusting him at all. All right. So Um, kind of forgot my analysis point, but about okay. So I'm not saying anything that's 100% here, but the evidence doesn't show. It shows. I'll just summarize real quick. It shows that it appears by history, geography, and all that. And I'll get back to the Hitler thing. But that well, I might have finished that point. I might get back to it. Might not. Geography shows that dark skin came from living close to the equator, below the Sahara Desert, before for about 3,000 years or so after the flood before Christ, and that's a long time to live there. And we haven't learned each other's languages yet. I haven't. I still haven't. I'm not that smart guy for that kind of thing, but and I don't think you have to learn everybody's language. If you learn it young, you'll learn it. I could have learned it if I started young, some language, and I don't know how many. But in general, though, people, even the people who are interpreters and all that, that didn't start happening for a long time. So people lived near the equator for that long, and I believe they developed their skin darkened because it just makes sense. Because, and I've heard this scientific, and I can't remember where I've heard it from, but it makes sense too, that the plants near the equator, vegetables and plants, have more vitamin D than other places, the natural ones that grow there in the wild, to help protect people's skin from the UV rays of the sun, because they're stronger near the equator. And so that makes sense to me, that the skin would darken, and over time, generation to generation to generation to generation to generation of 3,000 years, you build a gene that you pass down to your kids, your skin darkens. All right, so they have a good tan, right? And beige people, it's not really white people, and it's not really black. It's dark brown and it's beige. So people, you got to look at the similarities. There's more similarities than differences between black and white people. And that's because they're not really black and white. They're brown and beige. And beige, you go out in the sun, you burn it first. People make fun of that and get stuck on that. But it turns, if you don't burn too bad and it doesn't peel, then that redness is just a little burnt. It turns brown. It turns tan. And so, and people like having that tan because it's a healthy skin. I think black skin looks more pure and healthy than white skin a lot of times, because through the paler skin, you can see, I won't say, you can see impurities easier on the skin. You can, but you see through the skin more. You see the blood vessels. You see when somebody blushes or they're embarrassed. You see the blood and the capillaries through the skin. So, so the darker skin. That's one reason people like white people, beige people, light skinned people like to go get a tan. It makes them look a little healthier. Has a little healthier look a lot of times. So it doesn't mean that white people are ugly because of their skin. I mean, most people, if somebody has an attraction, it's because you see them smiling all the time. It doesn't matter what their skin is or what anything else is. Smiling eyes, mean eyes, if they're mean, then they don't look that attractive. If they're just always mean, even if they have some cute traits or whatever, if they're always mean, you can't see those cute traits while they're always being mean and frowning and all that. So it's not all about skin, what beauty comes from, but I would say that darker skin has a more pure, healthy look to me. I mean, it does in general, really. So if you want to pick on darker skin, you could say, well, you could see, some people want lotion. I know a lot of folks, they like to put lotion on their calf muscles and stuff because they feel like when the skin dries, you can see it flaking more. Okay, so there you have it. White people, you don't see their flaking skin as much. That's not true. If you see dry skin on anybody, it's kind of annoying when it flakes off. But I get it here on my eyebrows sometimes up here, and I'm like, oh, geez, what's that? And that's after doing too much coffee, or so it dries your skin out. But anyhow, so if I stay off caffeine more, those products that dry you out, I don't have as much flaky skin. And it annoys me, the flaky skin. So, especially if I start my skin cracks the side of my lips and all that, it hurts. Or if my fingers crack, especially in the winter when they get dry, it helps to stay off coffee for that. Have more vitamin C. Anyway, but I'm just giving you. Look, that all that I just said seemed like a waste. I'm going to get back to the main points, but it shows I know what I'm talking about with skin. It shows I know from a health standpoint. It shows I know about vitamins and vegetables and a little bit about all that, and a lot really, as far as nutrition goes. So vitamin D. So generally, darker skinned people seem to have developed below the equator, and that does make it seem like Adam and Eve probably weren't black, because it seems like lighter skinned people turned black, darker skinned. I'm sorry, let's quit saying black because it's brown. But lighter skinned people, darker skinned people will say that. Lighter skinned people moved, immigrating to the equator and staying there for years and years and years, a couple thousand years. Their skin darkened, living near the sun, and that makes complete sense. I can't say it's 100% how it all happened, but it makes sense that they turned darker living near the equator. But how does that make them any less connected to Noah being our father, our grandfather, great-grandfather, than anybody else? It doesn't. How does that make them any less? How does that make Noah any less connected to Adam and Eve than anybody else? It doesn't. So why did they keep making a big deal about skin tone? So we got ethnicity because God changed the language. That's where we got ethnicity and moved to different regions of the earth according to language. It wasn't about skin tone. Skin tone, I think, comes from living near the equator for such a long time, or living up in freezing Russia and all that. And those people are white, light skinned. I'm sorry, light skinned. So, but you'll say, okay, you want to challenge that? Okay, well, how come you can move to Florida and you don't turn black after a while? I'm saying they lived near the equator for 3,000 years. Okay, and I've seen people down there in Florida that lived there a long time, who go to the beach a lot. They do darken, and that's within only 20 years and stuff. So, I mean, it seems to fit to me, and it's not because they're the closest to the equator, but they stay out in the sun a lot. So, as you get closer to the equator, as a matter of fact, I haven't looked on the map how close Florida is to the equator, but anyway, the closer you are to the equator, I'm pretty much assuming there's more UV rays, and your body needs protection. And God naturally put plants there to help you create more vitamin D, which is what you get from the sun, is vitamin D naturally too, that darkens your skin too. So in that process, and so you get more melanin. I think everybody has melanin, not just darker skinned people, but they have more melanin. And vitamin D is a hormone, so it could affect somebody being more athletic than others. That because there's yams in Africa, and there's different hormonal foods that do boost growth hormone, and so who knows? I mean, I'm not getting into all that, but that is evidence, though, that dark-skinned people come from Africa, from Hams, and the Bible it was well known that darker-skinned cultures come from Noah's son Ham, and his family had moved to Africa. All right. Some people will say, well, there's Aborigines in Australia and stuff. Well, Australia's near the equator, but people from Africa that could have moved to Australia too. But in Australia, close to the equator. So, I mean, however, let me give you some evidence that there are some black Jews. All right. So, also go ahead and validate that Israel's mostly white. It was. Now it's changing, and people can make it look like it's not, but it has over the years was mostly white. It appeared to be white from what I could see. A lot of people think in Jesus' time, though, he may have looked more similar, a little almost like a Pakistani. So it's not far from Pakistan. It's not far from Egypt. It's not far from what? I haven't studied my map in a while. Not super far from Turkey and Iraq, I guess. I don't know. But then it's not far from the European countries just north of it. It's in the middle of everything. Israel is. But the Jews themselves, Moses' family was the Jews. He was adopted by Egypt when Pharaoh went around to kill all the babies, and so they hid Moses in a basket in the river, and Pharaoh's daughter ended up finding the basket and adopted him, and so he was really a Jew. And I'm leading up to how we do have black Jews, legitimately black Jews, not the ones that are being racist and lying, and hating on the Bible actually. So I kind of got off one subject. So there's a new group out there that also teaches. They teach the Old Testament, and that Jesus is a devil, but the real God is in the Old Testament, and Jesus is like the devil lying to us. So, and that's a big thing. And they know their Bible well, but they won't let you talk over them. And they get mad. They think they should harm me because I believe in Jesus, and I discount that the Old Testament stands alone. So, and that's kind of related to Judaism a little bit, but they're not violent like the people I ran into. Some black guys I had run into that were really big into that. And they weren't calling themselves Judaists either. I forget what they called themselves. They were just Old Testament only, they call themselves, or something. But it's just a new branch of people who have been taught by Islam that's Antichrist. It's just people who are really trying to push Antichrist, and now they're claiming the Bible to try to trick people, but claiming only the Old Testament. See, so I've run into a lot of Muslims and they want to debate me, and but the new thing I run into is these branches of that, and so it's more like you could call it just a branch of Antichrists, specific people making up stuff just to be Antichrist, and so and because there's a high white population that believes in the Bible, and so that's where they want to try to falsely claim it's a white supremacist religion and stuff, because there is a lot of white people that believe in the Bible, and but they're not wrong for that. And so I don't know why more white people than black people believe in the Bible, and I don't know if that's accurate either to say that, because if you look at Ethiopia and different countries in Africa, a lot of them believed in the Bible, and if you look at black Republicans, a lot of them believe in the Bible. And then you look at black Democrats, there's quite a few that are just being tricked by CNN and MSNBC and others. Even white people fall for it. I say even white people because white people aren't the targets for them to lie to. The media lies specifically to black people on purpose. So the Democrat media. And so, but there's white people that have fallen for it and act like they've fallen for the victim game. Right. And so then you got black folks who are in on the lie, too, who are usually Islamic or they're the slave masters from Africa that moved here to continue trying to make slaves through the drug cartels. And they joined with the Democrats to do that. And the Democrat was the party of slavery. So they sit there lying. This is speculation, but but you see it. That's what happens. That's what they do. So they lie about police and everything else to keep the ghettos enslaved to the drug cartels, right? There's nothing easy about being a slave to drug cartels, being isolated by drug cartels and by Democrats, and allowing all the murderers in the black community to run the black communities, all the murderers and bullies to keep running the black communities through gangs, the ghettos, not all black communities, but the ghetto black communities. And there's some people in black communities who claim we need to grow together as black people only and only stick together as black people and all that. And they're helping conspire the ghettos being slaves to that regime, the drug regime, which is a sabotage regime, right? The way it's set up. I mean, it's an easy thing to trick people with because there is a problem with doing drugs and alcohol. If you do too much, you can get in the car and drive and kill somebody by accident. All right. So that's a legitimate, why it's easy to play tricks with all that stuff. But so there should be rules about drugs and all that. That's not what makes it racist. What makes it racist is they demonize certain medicines, and they had dumped it a long time ago on the black community, I think. But that was scientists, evolutionists, though, and the Democrat Party that started doing that. And then white people in the Republican Party, and even black people too, who are in the Republican Party today, some of them, they fall for the trick that drugs are from the devil, because of how strong those drugs are in the street. But if you actually use the natural plant, like a tea, it's just like coffee or tea, probably. It's similar. And but it definitely should be used like medicines. You don't talk about it like it's a food. You talk about it like a medicine with all the warnings and all that. And then I think they should leave it up to individuals to manage their own life with that stuff. But they should crack down on the dealing side of it and make people have a license to deal herbs. And then debate. And when you have the concentrated strong forms, it's hard to say if they should be in the pharmacy or what. But the easy part is they should make the herbal teas legal, but still within a licensed community. And they shouldn't charge you $300 to $400 to get a license to use it, because they'll just end up still getting it from the street, most people. All right. And then it's not safe. It's not, you don't know if it's mixed. Then you can be isolated. You can go to jail. So they play tricks. The dealers like to play tricks and set people up to go to jail and all that stuff. And they don't end up going to jail because the Democrat lets them out because they're a killer. That's what the Democrats like to do. They like to keep killers on the loose. They like to keep plenty of serial killers alive in jail to run the prisons, so we can't have it that stops it from being a rehabilitation place. They like keeping killers alive to silence people and tell them you can't talk religion or politics. So you can't learn any of the stuff I'm teaching right now, which, I mean, I'm teaching certain points that I know 100%. And then, and I'm going to go, so we'll get to that point right now, by the way, one of those main points. And that's I forgot. Here it is. It's, back to Moses, okay? Moses led the Israelites out of Egypt after slavery. They crossed the Red Sea. I don't remember the whole path of where they followed, but they went to the Promised Land. Was Canaan that? I forget. Anyway, they went up through Israel and off west a little bit, but all around Israel mostly. And so I haven't really looked and studied this part. Actually, just right now, before I started this video, I had thought of that. I need to study their pattern of how they traveled after that more. But they landed in Israel. And so those who escaped Egypt, led by Moses, they were the Jews already when they were slaves in Egypt. And I don't know, I can't tell you this, but I'm telling you, you can connect the dots. There's other people that can look at this and connect the dots here and study it. I don't have time, really, I'll be honest. And I'm just about to run out of time, and I don't want to. I'm going to hurry, get to the main points and finish. But they can connect the dots before Egypt, perhaps. There's not too many dots to connect because it starts from Noah's Ark. But Ham went to Africa, and whether it was Japheth or Shem, I think it might have been Japheth that was near the family that went near Israel. I'm not sure. And Shem's family went westward mostly. But you have to double check on that. So let's just say it was Japheth's family, maybe, that Israelites came from. Maybe. So why were they chosen to be Israelites? Maybe it's just, I don't know, maybe they became that because that's where they landed in Israel, and God chose that central location. I don't know what his reason is, but I do know one of the reasons that God calls Jews the chosen people is because he used that family to write the Bible, make the Old Testament, and keep a record of so-and-so begat so-and-so, so-and-so begat so-and-so, all the boring parts, unless you have a perfect memory. And that shows that we're all one human race. And so that you kept it with them separated until Jesus came and finished his work. Then he said we could mix with the Gentiles. And I'm not Jewish, but spiritually, I'm a Jew. I guess everybody that's a Christian is a Jew by spirit, according to that. But so Moses' family was the Jews in Israel, right? How do I know if they're white or black? I'm not going to get into that. I'm out of time. I'm really out of time. And geez, I'm out of time. Okay. But so the point, I'll just make a quick summary point. It's legitimate that there were some black Jews because Moses married an Ethiopian woman. So they were married into being Jewish, but they weren't the actual Jews. So there was, and some people say she's not black, that she moved from Saudi Arabia to Ethiopia, but I don't know that. So there are legitimate some black people married into the Jewish community, and Gentiles and Jews did mix sometimes, just not regularly.